live on the YouTube side, live on the Twitch side. Hit this button. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the new Flash review. But before we do that, pretty much for the folks at home, it is we do on this podcast.
On this podcast, we really just talk about movies at this point. Let's be real. We're just a movies podcast.
We'll get back to
so
games.
Many of them too. I mean, I don't know. We did a Diablo 4 episode. Obviously, a lot of the back half tends to be gaming stuff. But you know, the front half for a long time has been very movie focused. I feel like recently.
This is your fault, buddy.
Yeah, this is my fault.
You maybe watch all those
covering everything.
We should. What we should have done is the same thing we do with Star Wars, where we like take the Fast and Furious movies, 3 movies at a time instead of individually or something like that. But
yeah, that's probably true. But you know, listen, we're past that point. We're past the point of no return, Mango. Anyway, so today we're talking about The Flash, the highly controversial and anticipated movie that was supposed to come out 5 years ago, and has instead come out today to weirdly good reviews, even though there's like a ton of controversy around its star, and it's in the middle of this this is one of the strangest movies probably ever, if you think about its like weird genealogy, right? You know, started under the regime of one group, bought by another company, and then put under another regime, and then produced mostly under that one, and then bought by another company, and then reshot a bunch to fill the sort of needs of a third group. The fact that this movie exists is kind of a weird miracle, if I feel like I'm being honest. But yeah, that's The Flash.
All right, let's give our pre-spoiler opinions, I guess. Buddy, how did you feel about this movie?
I ping-ponged on this movie really hard. It got me and lost me a lot, where there were moments where I was just like, okay, I guess we're sort of not doing this. Oh, wait, never mind. I'm sort of on board. Okay, you know, whatever. This is sort of boring. I ended in a good place with The Flash, is what I would say. I ended in a good place, and it does some stuff, some complicated meta-ethical things that I really, really liked. And it kind of beats out the pack because of those things, which I think are incredibly smart story decisions, which is good. The bad is that I don't feel as though those story decisions are as well supported as I would otherwise like them to be. This is probably one of those films, which is a common thing for me in DC movies, where it is more ambitious, right, than its counterparts, but it has a lot of flaws kind of along the way, right? Just sort of the name of the game, I guess. So, you know, yeah, I ended in a very good place. There's also a lot of like really special stuff that I was like kind of like, I didn't know that I could be wowed by this movie as much as I was, I guess, is where I'll end it. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I agree with you about the ping-ponging thing. I want to say ultimately ended in a bad place. This movie is meaningless on multiple levels. And the way I would describe it is if Kevin Feige and Zack Snyder had a baby and both of them drank heavily during the pregnancy. So, you know, not, I mean, it's not so bad that like I want to like, you know, shit on it from on high, right? Like I still think it's better than say Black Widow, right, to draw parallels across the aisle. But like it is just like there are so many things that like bother me. Like some of the CG is so abysmally terrible that I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. It is honestly, some of the CG is so out of the. It's honestly so bad that it was out of the uncanny valley for me in a way, right?
Oh,
like
yeah,
I was listening to a review where somebody talked about how the CG had this uncanny valley effect, and I was like, honestly, I don't think it did. I think
it was just obviously fake.
It was just obvious. Yeah, exactly. It was just obviously fake. It was like a fucking Pixar film at that point, right? Yep, that stuff pretty awful. A lot of the action was not great, and I don't know. There's a lot about this movie. It's complicated to deal with.
And you know, that's not like, you know, there's it's got time stuff, and some of that stuff is wonky, but I'm willing to forgive all of that because like you can never make that quite make sense because like that's like how the nature of
It
the
also
beast.
has a very interesting take on time travel, which I love. I think that this is part of what I like a lot about this movie. Is I think it's one of the first time travel movies that I have liked since maybe like Looper, was
Okay.
another good time travel movie. Outside of time loop movies, there have been a lot of time loop movies that I like. Edge of Tomorrow and Palm Springs are example of time loop movies, but I think those are
Groundhog
fundamentally
Day.
different than time travel.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, no. The what was the other thing I wanted to point out before the spoiler warning? Oh, just like that. There's also like weird evolving meta problems with this movie that I like don't really affect the movie directly, but like, so very minor spoilers. There is a moment where they show a flash from like an old movie, like an old movie. Apparently, one, they didn't get that person's permission in any way, shape, or form. Two, that character wasn't even the Flash in its own continuity. That character was a villain pretending to be the Flash as part of a plot point, and they just like didn't realize that or something, right? Like this is like Teddy Sears playing Solomon or something like that, which is a thing.
Yeah,
That
and then the other thing is obviously all the stuff surrounding Ezra Miller, which I have unfortunately, I was like, I'm going to do a deep dive on this. I'm going to get to the bottom of this because I feel like this just reeks to me of a lot of things that have cropped up recently where, the soundbite takes over. And when I actually look into the thing and I get kind of deep into how everything works, I realize that it's wildly different than kind of the narrative. So my instinct is actually kind of to, in a weird way, take Ezra Miller's side just because I'm so distrustful of the way social media talks about this stuff. But I haven't actually done that. So,
Yeah, I remember when I went and looked into it at the time, it was like, he got arrested in Hawaii for breaking into somebody's house, right? Like,
yeah.
The very cynical take is I guess that like, plenty of people do terrible things all the time and doesn't stop their films from coming out. It's just weird in this case because there was so much time between Ezra Miller being a fuck up and the thing coming out, right? Like, Amber Heard got written out of Aquaman 2, but that was like before her films got shot, right? Like, we'll see what happens with Jonathan Majors, right? Like,
The Jonathan Majors, that one is serious, right? Like that one is crazy because he's the linchpin of this whole phase of you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
Ezra Miller is the star of one movie. But ultimately, like you can pivot around that kind of thing, right? You can pivot around, Amber Heard in Aquaman 2. But like Jonathan Majors they named the movie Avengers the Kang Dynasty. Like, how are you gonna get around that? I don't
I
know.
mean,
We'll see.
they did it once before. Like my joke has been they should replace Jonathan Majors with Terrence Howard, and bring it full circle.
Yeah.
Obviously, the MCU was in a lot earlier stages when they replaced Terrence Howard with Don Cheadle. But they could still do something. Like, I mean, Kang is enough of a like time bullshit character that they could pull something out of their ass and make it work.
Yep.
And that's as I understand this about Jonathan Majors, it's not like just the one incident that like is a he said she said thing, but like in his past, there's a lot more things that like make this a lot less ambiguous, I guess. But who knows?
Yeah, like coincidental, right? It's like actually this is part of a pattern, which is also something I learned because I did look into the Jonathan Majors thing a little bit. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, but yes, I was not a huge fan of this movie. There were moments that got me, but like the ending ultimately just kind of was like.
Okay, I feel like what's gonna happen is the ending is the thing that made this movie for me, and the ending is the thing that broke this movie for you.
Yeah, I
is
think
that
that's
right?
pretty true. Yeah.
Is it surrounding around the sort of storytelling decision around him being his own sort of like time villain and all of this stuff? Like,
Well,
is it that stuff, or is it like
we should probably put our
Oh my god,
warning
you're
here.
right. I fucking what did I say?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Whatever. Spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! If you would like to see this movie and not be spoiled, put it here, or stop watching here and come back, listen to it later.
Yeah.
But anyway, point being, your question was about what the program. It is not specifically the time paradox stuff. Like that's the stuff I can forgive, right? Because it's like time bullshit and whatever, right? Like Flash creates himself, or alternate Flash forces Flash Prime to create alternate Flash, that's fine, whatever, right? Like it's weird, it's kind of nonsensical, but that's a time plot thing that I'm willing to forgive. The thing that kind of like broke the movie for me is like he comes out of it and it's like the movie might as well not have happened, right? And like and on multiple levels,
Okay.
it might as well not have happened because like this iteration of the DCEU is dead, right? Like, and on top, like I mean, so I have again, you don't know what I title these, but I called it the infinite retcon, right? Like literally now there is anything that happened in the previous movies doesn't have to matter, and so theoretically, any movie going forward could be part of the cinematic universe, and it doesn't matter because Flash fucked up the timeline, right? Like, and like on its own, that doesn't bother me so much. But what bothers me is just like the movie, like the only thing that happens in the movie, I guess, is that the Flash like learns to not fuck with time, right? Like, and if like, and saves his dad, sure, that's something that's like a personal point, but like, effectively the movie is none of this movie mattered, and the lesson the hero learned is to never do that again, right? Like,
Oh man, see, okay, this is where I would have a real big difference because the lesson is what makes it for me. The lesson is the thing that I find so important, and it comes in this ecosystem of all these fucking multiverse movies, right? We've had Spider-Verse and its sequel, right? But also Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, but also the the Spider-Man No Way Home stuff, right? And I have that, and also Kang, Quantumania. And I've had a lot of issues with the way that this stuff sort of presents itself because I think the meta ethics are dog shit, essentially, right? Most of the time, it is boiling down these superhero movie plots to some form of trolley problem that is just kind of like people are guessing based on incomplete information, and then like actually this is a solvable issue, but nobody wants to talk about it. You just sort of want to punch, right? The Flash is the first of these movies that I feel has sidestepped those meta-ethical issues by instead of focusing on kind of the high-level philosophical questions at play, right? It instead focuses on the very personal questions, right? And on the thematic questions at play, right? So it is not a movie about like exploring the philosophy of like whether or not you pull the lever on this, quantum trolley problem, right? But on the kind of individual ramifications of what it means to be a hero, what it means to sacrifice, what it means to kind of like strive and try to, make the world a better place. And I think all of that stuff, that's the stuff that got me. I cried at the end of this movie, just because I thought it was. I have to say, this is weird. Ezra Miller is a really good actor. I didn't expect to say that. I kind of don't think that I haven't thought that he's all that good in previous things. But the way in which he was able to act against himself and sort of embody two different characters at the same time and their drama and their emotions, right? Really did sort of kind of floor me and bought me into sort of the emotionality of the narrative or the idea, but the idea that he has to sacrifice his mom, right? Like, he wants to do the thing where he undoes this incredibly painful moment. But when he sees the ramification, he does the ultimately selfless thing, which is cause himself immeasurable pain, right? Because it, saves sort of the fabric of the universe, and he can heal and move on from that moment. All that stuff just worked so well for me. I was like, yes, finally. I was prepared to come into this and say I didn't super like the Flash. I thought it was empty. For like 90 minutes, the first 90 minutes, this movie was no thoughts, head empty, right? Basically didn't have a brain in its head. Kind of was just like cruising on the kind of raw compulsion of, does this little adventure click for you? The adventure itself was fine. I didn't have any problems with any of the pieces. I thought some stuff was cool, some stuff was, dopey, whatever. But right at the end, it just kind of like randomly pulled all of those strings together and to make this kind of poignant moment about like what it is about, I guess, all that stuff I just explained. And that's what caught me. That's what hit me where I live. which is, I guess, a little bit different, right? Because I don't really care so much about, but in a certain sense, I think I would agree with you if I felt like it didn't have that personal layer, right? Because the film refocuses itself on his personal decision, right? And on the way that he gets to choose how this all resolves in a way. I sort of don't care about the overarching meta plot, nature of the
Sure.
DCEU. Essentially, because he has a satisfying character arc, this is what I would say. Because he has a satisfying character arc, and he learns and he grows, and I buy into all of that stuff. I actually do think that this movie matters, and this like adventure matters because it transforms him, the Flash, into a better person. If that makes sense.
So I get all of that. Part of it for me is that like, and this is the part of the time stuff that I have an issue with. He doesn't convince me that like he's right at all. Right? Like the rules that they establish in the universe, Michael Keaton Batman establishes this neat thing, I will say, which is, the branching point isn't actually a branching point. It's got retroactive causality. That's the term they use, right?
It's my other favorite detail.
Yeah, no, and I think that is a neat thing. There are a couple of things in here that like just kind of like don't make sense. So the first one, and this is the thing that kind of like sucks the emotional stakes of him re-killing his mother out of it, right? Which is he then saves his dad, right? But like that means he didn't learn the fucking lesson, right? Like he doesn't know that saving his dad won't do the exact same thing that saving his mom did, right? Like and we know it doesn't because George Clooney's Batman now, right? Like, it's a different Bruce Wayne, right? In the terms of the movie, right? So who knows? Maybe Zod shows up tomorrow off screen, right? And the whole thing happens again and Batman or Superman doesn't exist, but we don't know because the movie doesn't continue that far, obviously. But like the rules that they establish is if you change anything, you could potentially change anything in the timeline. Right.
Hold on. That's not the okay. I think this is like a rules layer thing. I don't think that's the rules that they establish. The rules that they establish is that there are some things that are fated, right? There are some places where the timeline has to go the way that it goes. You can't change those moments. And he realizes that his mom dying is one of those moments. But that doesn't say to me that his dad is the other end of that.
So
you know what I mean?
So the fated thing, they don't establish that like no. His mom dying is not a fated moment because it doesn't happen, right? Like the fated moments are like entirely localized, right? Like a Batman always exists, right? Or like the end of this is part of the problem too. Is one, they don't actually have evidence of that, right? This is a thing that the Flash theorizes and then decides is true when like it matters, right? Like he gives up after one iteration on the final plot thing. And I get it, right? That's thematic and whatever, right? And like maybe villain Flash showing up like proves him right, essentially. But he has no reason to believe that this moment is a particularly locked in moment. He's just like, yes, the plot has decided that this needs to be a locked in moment in order for the story to, for this movie to wrap up in, 20 minutes. So it will be a fated moment. It's not like, if he had like, attacking, a science gadget that told him this was a fated moment, right? I'd believe it more. This is entirely conjecture on his point. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because he interferes with himself attempting to solve the problem, right? Like, this is the moment where he makes that crucial like piece of character growth.
Sure. This is the thing that I think carries that whole bit is that the mechanics of whether or not it like actually makes sense kind of don't matter because what really matters is that he realizes that sometimes bad things do happen and you have to deal with them. And that's the world that he lives in. And he has to be the bigger person. And he has to be the hero to make the sacrifice for the entire cosmos, right? In order to undo the damage that he's literally watching as these universes are like unraveling before him.
I get that, right? Like that, like I get that story beat. The thing is the plot doesn't convince me that is actually true, right? Like there are bad things that have to happen. There are bad things happen to good people, whatever. That doesn't mean that every bad thing that happens has to happen, right? That's why superheroes are a movie genre, right? Like, good people can stop certain bad things from happening, right? Like that is the theme of literally every superhero movie till the end of time, right? You give a good person the power to make things better, they will, right? Like,
right, but so to me, this is internally consistent because yes, that's true. Some bad things are going to happen. You have to deal with them. There's more to this, obviously, right? But this is why I think his mom is a fated moment, his dad is not, right? Which is to say that he realizes just because he can't save his mom doesn't mean that he can't save his dad, and he does make the decision to do so.
Right, but he doesn't. He has no reason to believe that his dad wouldn't be a fated moment, right? Like unless you're telling me that like he would go back in time if it turns out that his dad like causes Zod to show up tomorrow, right? Like, he like moves the tomato cans and he goes back to the present and it turns out like, it's a crumbled husk, right? Like he doesn't, by the nature of how they establish this rules work, he can only know if something's a fated moment by like trying to change it and failing. And like, this also doesn't allow for the possibility that like, maybe the thing he changed was the wrong thing, there's like, it seems to me that the Flash's conjecture is that it's a fated moment if I try and redo it and it fucks up, right? Like, and that's basically it, right? Like,
okay, I think I get this, right? In a certain sense, it is about where you're willing to sort of suspend disbelief. Because in my head, this stuff sort of doesn't matter, right? I'm kind of willing to take it on the movie on its word that his dad is not the fated moment his mom is. This is why this all sort of breaks out the way that it breaks out. And he's kind of okay with the world in which he's living, which is an alternate, he's not in his main timeline anymore. He's in a different one, but it's a stable timeline, right? And this is why George Clooney's there and he's happy and whatever else kind of thing. But I do see what you're saying in the sense that I don't think that is truly justified in the narrative. And it's about whether or not you're willing to kind of, like give the story that amount of like story credit in order to bridge the gap.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
The other thing here is too is that this fated moment thing doesn't actually like work on its own terms, right? Like you keep saying that his mom dying is a fated moment, but like we don't like as they describe it, right? Like the fated moment are things that like will happen regardless, and we know that his mom dying doesn't the thing that will happen regardless because he stops it from happening. The two fated moments that we like are aware of are like the Batman exists. And like, someone shoots Batman's parents in Crime Alley and that like, this alternate version of Earth, I guess Zod has to win, right? Like these are the things that the text explicitly tells us are fated moments. They don't say that his mom dying is a fated moment. They just show us that the consequences of changing it are bad, right? And it's not like the timeline is unstable either, right? It's not like the timeline falls apart if his mom doesn't die. It's just Zod wins and the Earth gets, terraformed to be New Krypton, right? This is bad, but it's not an unstable timeline. The thing that destabilizes the timeline is the Flash keeping trying to fix it, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true, I guess. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I get it, right?
I sort of see what you mean. Yeah, well, yeah, I guess that is true that we don't know how yeah.
Also, like the timeline's unraveling, like we are provided like that is the thing I'm relatively willing to give on faith that like, fucking with the timeline just causes bullshit to happen, right? But there's also like no real justification for that, right? Like, it is kind of like the Flash is trying to change things, and so it causes like these timelines to all go fucky wucky. But like, that's like not clear, right? Like,
yeah, it's also about like whether or not the Flash himself is an actor in the time. So
yeah, is the Flash paracausal, right? Like,
yeah, well, yeah, because it's sort of in my head. I wasn't thinking of the second Flash. Let's call him, Bad Flash, whatever, alternate Flash versus Flash Prime is sort of outside of this loop, right? And can kind of affect things. Alternate Flash is also outside of the loop, but is also inside of the loop in a way because like the decisions that are being made around him, he is being pushed into this position by Flash Prime. This is the thing in my head that's destabilizing that timeline is alternate Barry's presence is fucking with, I'm sorry, Prime Barry's presence is fucking with alternate Barry, such that alternate Barry starts destabilizing the timeline. This is the reason that it's a fated moment.
And this
Do you
is,
see what I'm saying?
And this is a constant, like...
But the thing is, what is the difference between Flash Prime being sort of a true agent, an actor outside of the fate of the fated moments, and alternate Flash being subject to the fate of the fated moments?
Right, like,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, is just Prime Flash paracausal or is alternate Flash also paracausal? And if he's not, then like he is a consequence of...
Because what I want to say is Prime Flash's presence in the alternate universe is the thing that destabilizes the timeline, right? And that necessarily sort of happens.
And this brings in the thing that I said I was willing to forgive, which is actually Prime Flash doesn't bring himself into the alternate timeline. Alternate Flash does.
Alternate Flash brings him into the time. Yeah. You know what?
Yeah, no, it so I get it. I get that, like, the emotional moment makes sense. Like, I felt the emotional stakes of that moment as well, right? Like, you know, having to give up your mother because you think it's the thing you need to do. The thing that just aggravated me about, and maybe this is just like the trap of it being a time movie, right? Is that like the logic behind it isn't internally consistent, and that bothers me, right? Like, I don't necessarily need full consistency. I just need like internal consistency, and it doesn't feel like it has it.
No, I think I do agree with you. So really the thing that I want to lean on is that I think it's so fucking smart that instead of making it about, you know, that the meta ethics of this galactic or this, you know, cosmic trolley problem, which is what I felt like Spider-Man No Way Home was doing. Which is what I felt like Multiverse of Madness and these other movies were doing or whatever, where it's just kind of like, because like all of the stuff that we're complaining about here is applicable to all of those other movies, right? Outside of maybe Into the Spider-Verse, I guess, technically. Because Into the Spider-Verse just sort of takes it for granted and shows very clearly right up front that swapping universes is bad and leads to really bad outcomes. And that's not about the trolley problem. That's just about like Miles Morales like growing and learning to be his own sort of hero with Peter B. Parker, that kind of thing. But the other piece of this puzzle is just that by refocusing it on Barry specifically, right, on this guy and his choices and the way that he has to make decisions, I think is really smart. And the other piece of this that I really love is the idea that a hero is not powerful enough to save everybody, and that's okay, right? Because I think that in a way this sort of feels like the perfect capstone to the DCEU, because I think the birthplace of the DCEU is this specific problem, right? It is the problem of the collateral damage in Man of Steel, right? If there is any legacy to that movie, right, it is that Zod and Superman fight in Metropolis and have this battle of the gods where Zod clearly, you know, announces his intention to genocide the planet out of raw spite, if nothing else, right? And Superman kills him for it, and in the way, a lot of people sort of die. And that moment and that sort of storytelling decision is sort of the catalyst for all of this other sort of stuff that would go on with superhero movies in general, right? The last 10 years of superhero movies has had a lot of back and forth about how we are to deal with these sort of facts on the ground. My argument has always been those deaths are not on Superman, they are on Zod, right? And that you can't blame Superman for not being perfect, right? It's his first day on the job. This is a story about, you know, having to throw a Hail Mary at the last second and winning the game in overtime before Zod just absolutely overwhelms you, because it's very clear by the text of that film that he is stronger and more adaptable than Superman, and the only thing Superman has is a couple minutes of effective head start because he's lived on Earth for 33 years and Zod hasn't, right? That's the bedrock of this argument. And it feels like the Flash is also kind of in an ethical way supporting that argument, which I really appreciate, right? There are multiple moments where, you know, like Bruce Wayne says the thing of just like, you know, sometimes bad shit happens and, you know, I didn't react to it great, but it is the world that we live in and we have to kind of like make do with that.
I am my scars.
Like yeah, exactly. Which feels like I'm being vindicated in my sort of argument versus the other sorts of arguments, which would be something like maybe Captain America in Age of Ultron is this, where, you know, Age of Ultron is entirely focused on this evacuating Sokovia thing, and Captain America kind of baselessly says the only, you know, like the only way we do this is if we save every single person. But like on a certain level, I don't think that that's a correct philosophy to kind of have or to expect a superhero to like aspire to. Obviously, you know, you do your best, but there's this idea that like we're gonna save everyone that does get to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the version of that argument is the strongest. Is you act as if you can save everyone because otherwise you like, you know, like the version of the story that would be interesting, right? Is like, you know, like no one doubts it, kind of like in the text of the movie that Superman tries his hardest, right? Like, or if they do, they're wrong, right? Like, you know, we know that Superman has tried his hardest, but like there is a version of this where like, you know, this is like, you know, million death statistics type thing, right? Is like, you know, with the other version of this is Captain America says, well, we're going to try our best and they're acceptable casualties, right? Like that's like, you know, villain-ish type stuff, right? Or like, you know, well, I could save this, like, you know, literally doing trolley problem calculations type of deal, right?
Yeah.
Which, you know, I get, and then I think you know, I appreciate, like, I think maybe just like I think I would agree with you that like Man of Steel, hit it right, but it's just like I think it's a hard beat to sell, right? Like, you know, you can't explicitly say in the text like you try your hardest. Like you could say, I guess you try your hardest and the chips fall where they may, right? But like you can't say it quite like that. Like you can't have Captain America saying like, you know, well, if some people die, guess that sucks, right? Like, so, you know.
Yeah, this is also why like Civil War didn't hit correctly for me. You know, we talked about this obviously, but just to sort of repeat myself, right? The genesis of Civil War needs to be like true irresponsibility, but the genesis of Civil War in the MCU is an act of true altruism, right? The Avengers literally tried their best, and I would say kind of made this mistake of insisting that they can and will save everyone when that's an unrealistic, you know what I mean? Like, I do agree with you. Captain America should not go there and say, well, if some people die, right? But like, I also think that the opposite is kind of the problem, where he says, we will save everyone, because I don't know. I don't like, I think that is bad and not good and ruins things. But then he gets punished for it anyway with the fucking Accords named after the place where the Avengers literally bent over backwards to save absolutely every person they could, right? Which according to the text is literally everyone, right? There are like casualties like associated with this. And I remember somebody once tweeted, I think it might have been Devin Faraci, randomly enough, who he tweeted like, the smartest thing that Captain America's Civil War ever did was show clips of the previous movies and insisted that the Hulk's rampage through Johannesburg only killed 10 people. Right? You know what I mean? Like, imagine being Man of Steel and being able to just say, oh, only 5 people died. Like with a straight face. And just like, you know, make that the text of the movie, even though it's absolutely not like the kind of the realistic thing. But yeah, so that was kind of the other piece of the ethics, or not the ethics, but like the themes of this movie that I did appreciate. I also just appreciated the world of, you know, the Flash, the opening sequence. This is part of the ping pong effect. I really like the opening sequence, right? This is like traditional Justice League stuff that you would expect to happen in a very like comic book, right? You know, you have some issue with some bad guy, and Batman and Wonder Woman and the Flash are all there, and you know they're helping out. I didn't super love his like time travel thing with the baby in the microwave or whatever. Like that stuff was kind of whatever to me, but just the general vibe of that was something that I was on board for, because that feels like that feels like the comics to me, right? That these characters exist, they cross over into one another's universes. That Barry goes to Bruce for kind of comfort or advice. All of that stuff was cool.
On the other hand, some of the bathos was some of the worst bathos, right? Like the fucking Wonder Woman lasso of truth thing made me want to like fucking cringe out of my skull. Like,
really? That didn't bother me at all, because I thought we were out of the drama, so I didn't mind. There is bad bathos in this movie, by the way, but
yeah,
that's
so
not it. Yeah.
So you're right. It's not quite bathos. It's like I don't think that's the right version of the scene, right? Like I think the right version of the scene is like Batfleck, like, you know, Flash talking and Batfleck refusing to open his mouth. And like then, you know, the Flash says the thing about like never having sex, and then Wonder Woman says lasso of truth, and then the Batman just keeps his mouth shut until he pulls it off, right? Like, you know, like you don't like I think fundamentally having the Batman say I can never thank anyone is like the wrong move. The right move is for the Batman to, you know, keep his mouth shut because he understands the consequences, right? Like,
yep, I think I agree with you. You know, the lasso of truth doesn't compel you to speak, right?
Yeah,
is really what you're getting at. Yeah, absolutely. I'm down for that. Yeah. How did you feel about the Michael Keaton stuff? Do you have a connection to that movie, that sort of set of circumstances?
not super heavily, right? Like, I thought that all of kind of like the cross universe stuff was neat, I guess. Like again, there's some weirdness about, you know, the alternate Flash. There's some weirdness about what's his name? The one who died, like, because he from Bed Sores.
Reeves.
Yeah, Christopher Reeves, right? Like there's some weirdness about like using Christopher Reeves, even though he's like, you know, like not alive to give consent anymore, right? Like, but like, you know, that's like ultimately minor. Like I was like, oh, it's Nick Cage as Superman. That's a thing we all know he's always wanted to do, right? Like that's neat, right? Like,
you not know this story?
What?
That is a holy shit. I can't hold on, let me back up. You obviously know who Kevin Smith is, right? Clerks,
Yes.
that guy. Okay. Kevin Smith got hired to write a Superman movie for this producer named Jonathan Peters or something. The movie was wild. Kevin Smith wrote a very straightforward Superman plot and then got a million notes to change it because this was in like 2001 or something. This is the movie, by the way, that would eventually become Superman Returns. They would shuffle people around until it becomes Superman Returns. And the interesting thing that Kevin Smith describes is how one of the things, it was supposed to be Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage was supposed to have this mullet. They wanted him to have a mullet. They did screen tests of Nick Cage in the Superman suit. And the final boss, like the final fight of the movie, was against a gigantic spider, because that's what the producer was putting in all of his films. And the punchline is that the next movie that he produced was Wild Wild West, of all things, which ends with the giant mechanical spider. This is like a very famous like Hollywood story, but it is like kind of an underground thing. There is a I wonder what it's called. It's like Kevin Smith used to do this talking tour.
Lou says in the chat that I've heard the story a lot. Kevin Smith talks about it all the time. See, the Kevin Smith story I'm familiar with is the I think it's Kevin Smith, is like his version of the Green Arrow, not Green Arrow. Who's the like? It's like the street level superhero with the dime glasses that has like the Asian sidekick.
Green Hornet.
Green Hornet. Thank you. Green Hornet. Where his version of the movie is like you don't actually see them doing anything. You just see them leaning on the car and talking about it, and they go off screen to actually do the action, and they come back. Right, like because that's the only Kevin Smith story I'm familiar with.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that.
So he says I've heard it on his podcast no fewer than 3 times. That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a like he used to do these college tours where he would just he would go around and, you know, talk for 2 hours about like adventures in the movie making business. And this Superman Lives story is one of those famous things. It was like a really underground thing in like the 2000s. They made DVDs of it. Like we watched them when we were kids or whatever. But yeah, and so that is like referencing that whole bit. I do think I agree with you. The thing I wanted to happen was to highlight the shows, or to highlight in some way like the animated universes. I don't really know how you do any of that stuff, especially now that Kevin and O'Neill, is that his name? The super iconic Batman voice actor from Batman the Animated Series.
Oh,
most
Kevin
recently
Conroy?
did Multiverse. Yeah, Kevin Conroy. I'm sorry. Yeah, Kevin Conroy. He unfortunately passed last year. I like that would be the way that you would tie it into like the Justice League universe, right? You'd maybe shoot some live action stuff, but you would hear his voice and you'd go, "Oh, I get it. This is that kind of thing." It sort of felt a little weird that those were the DC universes that they were pulling from, right?
Yeah.
But At the same time, I don't know. I kind of didn't super care about the mechanics of that moment because I was sort of in the I was
Like
in that like
the movie magic moment part of it.
yeah, the movie magic moment of going, oh my god, this movie had a point. Thank God it was all building towards, something, and it was
Yeah,
meaningful. And it's weird that Ezra Miller is a good actor.
that moment was also kind of weird because like there were like for a movie that is ostensibly about the Flash, there were two Flashes. Again, one of which wasn't actually the Flash, but that's metatext. It's not text. Um, uh, and like if I recall correctly, there isn't even like like the CW Flash, which would be the obvious thing to throw in there, right? Like it was a bunch
Yep.
of Supermen mostly, not like.
Which is funny because the CW Flash does in fact do multiverse stuff and pulls in Ezra Miller in his Justice League suit.
Really?
Yeah. This is the thing. In one of the Flash ended in season 8. I think it ended this year. I think maybe the season finale of last year's Flash was he pulls in a bunch of different Flashes. One of whom was Ezra Miller, and they did a whole thing because the multiverse. So yeah.
Okay. I was all.
Is that all okay?
I don't know. Like something that like weirdly bothered me was like how like bad the kind of like circly effect, like like his time running effect looked like. It looked like bad CG, right? Like when you could theoretically just like transpose the actual scenes, right? Like around a like you do like and this is the only place that Henry Cavill shows up is like in like one of those panels, right? It just like looks so bad, and it's again that's not like a that's not.
I liked the effect, but I agree with you. I didn't like the CG, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea that there are these, like these
Yeah.
rings, that the universes are sort of the stacked thing or whatever. FYI, there were 2 more rules beyond the Iron Spider. I know we've asked this, but they're so cringe. I don't actually. Oh, he has to fight a polar bear, right? He goes to the Fortress of Solitude. He fights polar bears. I'm pretty sure.
How is that anything but trivial for Superman?
Yeah, that's why it's so cringe. Yeah, it is like the most trivial thing. Absolutely. I don't remember where the other rule is, but yeah, this is all from Superman Lives. I do think that there's a whole thing about it, but yeah, it was supposed to be a Tim Burton movie. I don't know.
I have to auto mod Lou's comment in because it uses the term uses a quoted slur, I guess.
Oh no! Wow, yeah. Peters represented Smith with with 3 rules, such as wanting Superman to wear an all-black suit, feeling the more traditional suit was too gay, I will say, not wanting to see Superman fly, saying that Superman would look like an overgrown Boy Scout. Interesting. Well, this does bring me to the Superman, Kara Zor-El, Supergirl stuff. How did the return of Zod? It's very funny because Zod, or I'm sorry, not Zod. Michael Shannon is obviously in this movie. And in the press tour, he talked about how he was like, yeah, it was fun to come back to the character. I'm not quite doing the same like in-depth character study that I was doing in the first one, and everybody sort of clowned on him a little because it's like describing Zack Snyder's Superman as an in-depth character study is something. But I would go so far as to say that is fair. Zod is really doing nothing here but just sort of like being window dressing.
Yeah. If you told me this is all like stitched together and AI'd from like previous stuff and he didn't actually do anything, I might believe you, right? Like,
yeah.
Especially since he like never takes the fucking mask off, right? Like,
yeah. There were a lot of moments that I liked about all of this stuff, though. A lot of callbacks to Man of Steel. It was honestly, it sort of felt like the prequels in the Obi-Wan TV series, right? The Obi-Wan TV series, a lot of people didn't like them. And I would say a lot of people didn't like the Obi-Wan TV series for the fundamental problem of they don't like the prequels, right? They are the kind of Gen X red letter media folks who really don't like the prequels. And so anything that kind of takes the drama of the prequels seriously, and those characters seriously is kind of just never going to hit with them, right? I think a similar sort of thing happened in this movie, right, with Man of Steel, where I am a person for whom Man of Steel is a very important movie. I love that movie. I think it's good. And it speaks to a lot of my philosophy when it comes to like superhero movie making and everything like that. And so this movie did right by that movie in a lot of ways that I really, really appreciated. In the same way that I'm pretty sure those same Gen X people who might have hated Man of Steel would really love the way that this movie does right by the 1989 Batman film, which, to be fair, I am less enthusiastic about because that was the year I was born. Even though I do have a shirt from that movie. And it's my favorite shirt. So yeah, it is so old and ratty that I don't wear it anymore because I will destroy it and I just want to keep having it.
Yeah, weirdly to me, like my first Batman, I guess, is Clooney. Like that's
Batman and Robin?
Yeah.
To be fair, I loved Batman and Robin. I watched it a bazillion times. I owned it on VHS. Which was a whole thing. I could quote all of the freeze puns, you know.
which one is the one that Jim Carrey's the Joker in? Is in
that one is Batman Forever,
right? Because that has Batgirl, right?
No. Batgirl is in Batman and Robin. Batman Forever has Robin, but not Batgirl. Okay. And a lot of people like Batman Forever more than Batman and Robin. I think they're wrong. I think Batman and Robin is better, but what are you gonna do?
Yep, I mean, I also haven't watched those. That's my first Batman, but my Batman is probably Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan. Yeah. No, I would probably agree with that. Right, The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Weird that there were no Dark Knight references. I thought we were gonna get something, but I don't know. Maybe it's too ghoulish to sort of touch anything in The Dark Knight just because of Heath Ledger. Not that they would use Heath Ledger, obviously, but I don't know. There's something about that sort of cadre film discourse that is hard to deal with because Heath Ledger is so intimately tied to sort of the story of that film, even though it is the single most important, I would say, DC film ever, right? The hugest thing, right? It represents kind of the apex of that kind of superhero storytelling before we kind of move into the MCU era. Yeah.
And there's no reference to what's it called? Pretty Boy, Batman, the new one.
Robert Pattinson.
Yes.
You know what's funny? I thought Robert Pattinson was the one getting out of the car, not George Clooney.
Yeah, you know what? That would have made sense, right? That would have actually made sense, right?
I mean, I think the point that they're going for is that this version of the Flash is in an alternate universe where he's a little bit happier, right? And he's kind of in this stable version of his timeline where his dad gets out of prison and he's happy about it. And whatever. He's not in his original DCEU anymore, but he's in this one. This is kind of his happy ending. I don't think that they're doing anything with this stuff because obviously they're going forward with this James Gunn reboot of the universes or whatever. People have also talked a lot about how the universes colliding into one another is probably an indication that they have changed fundamentally. So someone the other sort of theory for this, and I sort of hate this just on its principles, but I will explain. The theory is that just the inclusion of, let's call him Infinity Flash, right, has fucked with the nature of the universes such that even though our Flash went back to his original sort of timeline, the worlds around him have changed and altered, and Ben Affleck has been replaced by George Clooney in the original version of the DC universe. Again, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's what the text of the movie is saying, but these are sort of the popular fan theories. I kind of think this is all stupid and dumb, and I don't even really want to talk about it that much, right?
So my super cynical take is that this allows them to do the thing where if they decide that they want to keep Jason Momoa as Aquaman, they can just do that, right?
Well, did you see the post-credit scene?
Yeah, right. But
okay.
This Aquaman 2 happened in the prime timeline, right? I guess we'll see if Batman shows up, who's playing him and how it matters, right?
To be fair, I actually do think that is an issue and that they're probably going to end up having to deal with it, because my recollection is that Ben Affleck shows up in Aquaman 2 is that he filmed stuff for Aquaman 2
You know,
and
it
was
would be
part of that.
you know, it'd be really funny if like he's in the first half of the movie and at some point like it just changes to George Clooney and the movie just doesn't comment on it at all, right?
Yeah.
Like and like anybody who doesn't see the Flash has no idea why the fuck they replaced the actor midstream.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that this movie has been reshot to hell for a variety of different reasons. I would probably say in a good version, the original version of the movie is sort of like Aquaman and Mira, but the reshot version is Orm and Aquaman, and so he's teaming up with the villain from the previous. He's teaming up with the villain from the previous movie, which as much as I love Aquaman and Mira, important, like foundational couple and everything like that. And I would also probably go to bat on some level for Amber Heard's inclusion or whatever in all of this sort of stuff. I think the dramatic tension of he's teaming up with his evil half brother who was the bad guy of the first film in order to do this thing in the second film is probably a better pitch in my opinion than, oh, he's teaming up with the girl that he is in love with, right? But I don't know. We'll see. All I want is Jason Momoa to stay as Aquaman. All I need. Just give me that, please, and I will be a happy camper for forever and always.
How
my
much of this is this an excuse to recast Mira? Like,
Yeah,
like
I don't
did
know,
they
maybe.
did they release this entire movie just so they could recast Mira? That would be
Well, there was a lot of
hilarious.
stuff about Amelia, what's her name? The woman who plays Daenerys Clark?
Fucking no.
What's her name? I can't remember. The woman who plays Daenerys, right? Obviously, which is kind of weirdly fated. Because they got their start together kind of on Game of Thrones, right? Like that was their big, catapult into movie stardom or whatever.
Lou
People
says
said that
Amelia
she
Clark in the chat, so thank
Yeah,
you.
okay, yeah, Amelia Clark. People are saying that Amelia Clark was recast, but I'm pretty sure those were just like rumors or whatever, like based on stupid stuff. People will do this stuff and where it will be like, he's in London. London is where they shoot Aquaman 2, and he posts a picture on his Instagram where he's getting coffee with Amelia Clark, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, she got recast or whatever." I don't know that this is the case. This is this is like
Yeah.
me like
This
creating
is
an
the
example.
level of like Glenn Beck like whiteboarding. That's like
Yes, yeah, absolutely. This is exactly what I mean. So who knows? We'll see. It is kind of weird that movie is coming out in 6 months and we haven't seen anything from it. When was the first Flash trailer drop? Maybe I'm just not used to time and that not enough time has passed.
Yeah, I don't fucking know, right? Like, I hadn't seen anything about the Marvels until I saw it before. What was the movie? Oh, Guardians 3, right?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, the timeline, the first Flash trailer dropped in February of 2023, so okay, I guess.
But yeah, I don't.
Do you want Ezra Miller to come back if you were the head of DC Studios and David Zaslav went to you and said, "I don't give a fuck about any of the controversy. I just want a good actor in this role." Do you keep or do you recast Ezra Miller?
I might keep like I don't know if I think he's important enough to keep him, but I don't like I'm a big fan of separating art from artist, right? Like he's not the first one, he's not even the worst one, right? Like and there's other like Chris Pratt, he's part of a church that very famously not get along well with gay folks. And
With the gays.
And so there's some people who think he should be recast, and like I can't care, right? Like I don't like if my standard would be like if he's in jail, he probably shouldn't be in the movie. And then once he's out of jail, presumably having served his time, he should that's fine.
Like Roman Polanski, small point. Ezra uses they them. Oh, I did not actually know that. But like Roman Polanski obviously fled charges. Like that's not kosher.
So I think like
He's maybe
again,
the worst example I can think of. Is
yeah,
what
yeah,
I'm trying
no.
to get at.
Roman Polanski like should probably face justice. I think it's probably bad that they gave him a standing ovation when he came back. But I don't think that means that his work is like shouldn't be viewed, right?
Yeah.
Like, that kind of thing, right? Like um, it would be weird if like Amazon refused to carry Mein Kampf, I guess, right? Like it's still like obviously there's like different concerns there, but like um,
Yeah. This is also sort of a little bit like the J.K. Rowling stuff for me, where it's like I think this all breaks down in the causal web of purchasing something equals moral endorsement of something, right? One of the things that I have always found funny is the way there is no ethical consumption under capitalism gets talked about these days, because the point of that quote is to say that consumption is not ethics. You are not being a good or bad person by consuming things, right? But people use that in a way that is really different than kind of the original spirit of the quote. And I feel like that kind of stuff also sort of applies here, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, I also like like there's an argument about like at what point is it like how much is like how much is like it being easy supposed to be the thing that makes a difference, right? Like if tomorrow, right, they want to cast a new Flash movie, they could easily not cast Ezra Miller for whatever reason, right? Like and like should that have bearing over like if the movie was like fully shot and edited and then something bad happened, should they go like scrap the movie for it? Like that's I think like I see more defense for the first than for the second one, right? But like that is purely on like the machinery of production rather than like a moral kind of like precept, right? Like if it's easy to do, you should do it, right? Maybe, which is like not obviously the strongest moral grounds, but
yeah. Well, we'll see whether or not they keep them, and
yeah.
where things go from here.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever even
I
another
think
Flash thing ever, right? Like, who knows?
I think the most interesting thing to kind of come out of this movie in terms of the future of like the production of like the DCU is that they signed the director Andy Muschietti. I don't know actually now how you would pronounce his last name. As the director for Batman Brave and the Bold, which they have promised will fulfill my long-awaited take, which is that Batman should be about the Bat family. It should be about Robin and Nightwing and all of those other characters. That's the promise of Batman Brave and the Bold. And my hope is
who is playing Batman in that movie? We don't know.
I don't know. Are they gonna get George Clooney?
So there was another pitch that I have heard throughout like the internet that I think would be cool, which would be like and would work with this. It's like not specifically, but I could see it working. It's like George Clooney plays Bruce Wayne, and it's
Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I would be all over that. Not gonna lie, Batman Beyond is the shit.
But yeah, that's we'll see, I guess, right? Like we'll see whatever. I mean, like, hey, they skipped original Ant-Man straight into Scott Lang, right, for Ant-Man, right? Like,
yep.
They could do that. That'd be neat. Especially since like Batman's a story like that has been done to death. Like it is funny that we basically got the Flash origin story in this movie, right? Like and only kind of like sort of, right? We don't actually see the moment. We see this like Flash Prime attempting to recreate the process. That was another thing that like a very minor thing that bothered me is like, wait, they figured out how to like reliably create a Flash, right? Like, okay, you've reminded me of something, right? They've created it, like, one, they found out a way to reliably recreate a Flash, right? Like, why doesn't Michael Keaton just do it to himself, right? Also, two, the way that scene goes down, right? Like, Michael Keaton, Ben Franklin, lightning bolts, Flash Prime, and it doesn't work. Kara, who doesn't know what's going on at all, is not present for any of these conversations, shows up and just flies him into the sky to be struck by lightning. What the fuck?
This is one of the moments where the movie it ponged for me. You know what I mean? I was just like, the fuck is going on? How does she even know that they're there? You know?
Right? No,
like,
that's a good point. I didn't even think of that. Really? She should know about the Batcave.
Like she flies back. Like, I don't know. Maybe you could say she flies back to the Batcave. She uses her super hearing to hear past the thunderous waterfall to hear their conversation. Like
X-ray vision, maybe. Right?
Like, yeah. Like, there were some. I liked this version of Kara Zor-El. The moment where Zod says, the infant didn't survive the process, just because he's such a fucking asshole, you know, and he just wanted to twist the knife or whatever. I loved that. And that's where she like discovers her heat vision and blasts him off the Black Zero. I was just like, yes, I'm on board with this. But there's a lot of stuff that I did not love about Kara, the way that they sort of like filmed her doing her stuff. Most importantly, she knows how to fly right off the gate. I hated that. One of the most important things about Man of Steel is that Clark has the everyone's favorite moment in Man of Steel is Clark learning to fly, right? Jor-El tells him, you can do this. You just need to keep testing your limits, right? And it's that super swelling of the soundtrack or whatever that everybody loves, and he launches himself into the air, but he falls, and then he refocuses, or whatever. And then later, there's a dark parallel to that moment where Zod does that thing where he says, "Where did you train? On a farm?" And then he rips off his things, and he flies for the first time, and that's when Superman is like, "Oh fuck, I'm gonna lose this fight." That stuff is so important, right? To I think kind of the mythology of specifically the Man of Steel kind of iteration of this character, right? So that she just flew from the first second bothered me on a dumb nitpicky level, right?
See, other thing I had presumed that she had some time out of the shell before she got put in the hole, essentially, and that's like, that was the explanation for all of that, right? Because like she should have been around for a little while at least, right? So, but yeah. Fair point.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And then the other thing is I just didn't love of that, specifically the Russia Siberia scene or whatever. And the action was kind of back and forth. I actually quite liked the stuff they did with the Kryptonians. Most of that is because a lot of it is callbacks, like I said, to Man of Steel, right? Like the moment where I think his name is Ursa, who is the giant Kryptonian. He jumps into the air and he gets onto Batman's plane. That's a reflection of a moment where he does that to one of the human the human, whatever they're called,
fighter jets,
whatever those fighter planes are, and you watch him as the guy tries to eject and he grabs his head and he crushes his head in his hand, and the splatter flies off the back of the screen. It's one of the most brutal but like cool moments in like Man of Steel. He does that with Batman, obviously, and so there's a lot of callbacks to those sorts of things, which I think are sweet. And also it's the moment where the Flash gets to be cool and do flashy shit, right? With where he's building up charge and he's zapping people is sweet. I love the moment where he takes off his gloves, right? In order to back up the Infinity, alternate Flash before he's Infinity Flash in taking down the Space Hulk guy with this way, making the Cyclone, all of that stuff. It's like perfect Flash shit, right? And so the movie was the action was very hit and miss, I guess.
I agree
when it came to.
No, honestly, the thing that popped in my mind is like, well, I guess it's okay to like fuck on Russians again because of like major geopolitics, right?
You're true. She murdered those Russians, right? Like she just threw, like you can see there's a cliff. She throws him off the cliff, and I was like, what? There's one guy she throws into like a canister on a roof and the whole thing explodes. And I was like, where is our Batman doesn't kill people discourse for
this? Does Kara have the same rules, right? Like she's,
I don't know.
It happened in the alternate universe, doesn't count.
A lot of this stuff, to be fair, is a callback to the Flashpoint comic. In the Flashpoint comic, it's actually even more brutal because, first of all, it's not Kara, it is Clark. And Clark has been held in a United States facility for his entire life, basically. and he does kill people when he comes out because he has been so like poorly like mistreated. But it's actually a very wholesome moment because he comes out, he kills people, he's in this sort of mania, and the Flash is able to talk him down essentially, and kind of he says the Clark I know, you know, was found by like a loving family, right? He was raised on a farm in Kansas. They have like a little moment, or and it touches the idea that like in every timeline Superman is a good person, right? Like he is fundamentally good or whatever, which I really like because I sort of don't like evil Superman stories. Like Injustice or kind of like whatever else. But yeah, the by the way, the recreating Flash thing is also a relic of Flashpoint. But in Flashpoint, it's also different because the Batman that he goes to is Thomas Wayne, not Bruce Wayne. In that version of
is
the
this
timeline,
the version where Bruce dies and Martha becomes the Joker?
correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
Martha becomes the Joker, Thomas becomes Batman, and he is a Batman with a gun. He uses the gun that kills Bruce, and he just fucking shoots people all the time.
That is like one of my favorite. Like I don't know, like the Indiana Jones style. You know, like flashy sword stuff, gun, right? Like, oh man,
Okay, well,
yeah.
we've talked a lot about this movie. But you know, I don't know. I
If
guess
you're gonna
that's
watch
where
Style of Destiny, I actually don't care about that movie.
I also. Are you an Indiana Jones person? I have never been an Indiana Jones person, so
Yeah,
I
my
medium care.
I was like kind of like atmospherically an Indiana Jones person. I like rewatched them all in college because I realized I hadn't watched them in a while, and it's like, you know what? Crystal Skull was bad. Wasn't as bad as Temple of Doom. Like that is my hot take. Is Temple of Doom is the worst Indiana Jones movie.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have strong opinions about it. My favorite was Last Crusade. I think Last Crusade is the best.
I understand that, but I think like in terms of your kind of like objective versus best, like I think Raiders is probably still the like kind of like from an objective standpoint the best
Really?
as like a movie. Not
Interesting.
that
Okay.
Last Crusade is bad, but like just Raiders sings better, I think. Even though like you know
the thing that I love most about Indiana Jones is the warehouse of crates. I think that moment like did something to my brain when I was like a little kid when I saw it. Because just like it is like truly great world building in the way that like John Wick, right? Where it suggests this greater existence, right? That is kind of out in the pastures, right? In it, that there is more to this than just this one individual story. And I really love that moment. I will forever love that moment. But yeah, I don't know. I've heard that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is fine. The biggest problem with it is that there's like a lot of CGI Uncanny Valley with like de-aging stuff or whatever, which I was like, yeah, Harrison Ford is like a gazillion fucking years old. If you try and shoot a movie with Joe Biden playing a 30-year-old, see, it's gonna suck, right? Like,
yeah no,
but yeah, it's
yeah,
also only in theaters. Is that right?
as opposed to
On Disney Plus or something?
I don't fucking know. I don't follow any of that bullshit.
Yeah, I mean,
like
I don't know. I like it in a world where I just have to watch it on Disney Plus, maybe.
yeah,
In a
that's
world
fair.
where it
You-
is
You have to go to a theater. It's a no. Yeah, no. I mean, and I fully expect the kind of trailer moments to be better in the actual movie. But there was also something about like, you know, I stole it, you stole it, you stole it. That's capitalism. Like that's not capitalism. Like that's not how that works.
yeah, so there's been this weird kind of in like the great liberalization of American politics. There's this weird thing about how like museums are bad because they like steal cultural artifacts from other cultures or whatever. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like Indiana Jones lives in a weird spot in that I don't know, in that world.
Yep. I mean, it's also like museums are like also generally not market based, right? Like they're explicitly
Yeah.
government run institutions, right? Like, um, but
Yeah, I mean, I have always had complicated feelings about because like I think I do understand the the idea or whatever, and I kind of would say yes, it's bullshit for the British Museum to have these like whatever Egyptian cultural artifacts, but it's also not like like this is part of the argument that bothers me. It's not like the British Museum is using these to make money because it's like no, like it is for the further to further knowledge and history and to keep a record of this stuff, when at the time that was a pretty radical thing, right?
Not only that, but they were also recovered at times where, like, their status in their native cultures wouldn't have been guaranteed, right? But, like, sticky spot there is, like, what? Like, the British are allowed to hold on to it until the Egyptians become civilized, and, like, saying that sentence is probably already
exactly.
gotten
And
fired.
also, like,
right?
whose fault is it in the first place, right? That, like, these colonized countries are so fucking oppressed that they have no kind of cultural heritage, as it is being, literally in some cases beaten out of it. Like, I don't, like I said, it's complicated.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I am kind of, I don't know, where do you put Indiana Jones? I don't have a take on any of this shit. Is really what I'm saying. I don't care about Indiana Jones enough to defend it, right? Or to attack it. It just is immaterial to me, right? It is this piece of politics, and it's this overlap of politics and that I just don't care about. You just can't
no,
get me to give a
I
fuck.
feel a lot of this way about J.K. Rowling just because, like, I always thought the Harry Potter books were bad, right? Like, and so it's like I can't get worked up about, like, either way about anything. It's just like, I guess I'm glad that people realize that those books are full of plot holes and not particularly good, but, like.
You know what? I will take the correctness parse of being, retroactively right about hating shit. Yeah, so I don't think we're doing Indiana Jones. I know. Do you want to do Kraven the Hunter? It's the other one. They poster today for Kraven the Hunter, which, to be fair, actually looks pretty baller. And I haven't seen the trailer. I don't know if it's gonna be good or not, but
yeah.
Do you know what Kraven the Hunter is?
He gains 2 power when something moves to his space.
Okay, hold on. Are you ready for this?
From
the studio that
brought
like you
big game hunter, right? Like
Morbius the Living Vampire.
Really?
yeah. Kraven the Hunter is a Spider-Man villain, right? And the idea is that Spider-Man is the ultimate hunt for him, right? He's always really fun because he's kind of one of those villains with, like, offbeat.
Like he's like relatively morally neutral, right? Like he's not like in it for, like, he's not in it because he wants power. He's in it because for the thrill of the hunt, right? Like.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of stuff underneath the surface that is sort of, like, neat about Kraven. People have always sort of liked him. To be fair, have always sort of liked him, mostly because I think he has a really bitchin' suit. He has that lion. I don't know if that's in. Let me see if I can look up the picture.
The Marvel Snap picture.
What's the Marvel Snap picture?
That is a reference. I mean, when you asked me if I knew about Kraven the Hunter, and I said it gets 2 power when someone moves to his space. Is like the Marvel card effect.
I didn't even put that together. No, because hold on, let me show you this. This is like the key art that they did today. Because his thing is he's wearing 2 hats, like he's wearing like a lion vest. Let me see if I can show you.
Oh, you know what? That is actually very similar to the Marvel Snap here. Let me see if I can pull this up super quick.
Yeah, I mean that is a very famous sort of pose for him. That is, like, actually, I'm pretty sure it is a reference to Kraven's Last Hunt, where Kraven finds out he's dying and he, like, goes and the shit out of Spider-Man or whatever. But God, where the fuck is this?
Here, I'm gonna put Kraven on screen for the people at home. The Marvel Snap card is relatively similar to. I will bring over the poster picture if I can.
Look at us go. I guess I'm talking us into it. Now we're going so
yeah,
hard.
I mean, I'm sure we'll see this one.
Yeah. I'm very excited. Kraven is cool. I also just like Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's the guy from Kick-Ass. He's Quicksilver, Ultron. He's a pretty good actor. He was in Bullet Train, actually. He's most recently.
What did he play in Bullet Train?
He was the white guy that was part of Lemon and Tangerine.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, he's the guy who has.
I missed a thing about Flash. Fucking Aaron from Dairy Girls plays Patricia, and I was just, like, out of my mind the entire time. Because I was so excited just because, like, I recognized her, and, like, she's speaking with an American accent instead of, like, her, like, very Irish accent that she does in in Dairy Girls, but you know, her name's like Saoirse or whatever, however you say that. Like it's like her like given first name.
Saoirse, I think is what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is, right?
Like Saoirse something McCullen or something like that.
Yeah. Are we doing Oppenheimer? Are you pumped for Oppenheimer?
I'm pumped for fucking Barbie. I tell you what.
To be fair, I'm pumped for both Barbie and Oppenheimer actually, and they're coming out the same day, so I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do a double feature of this too.
Yeah, no, my girlfriend and I talked about for Halloween. Like the thing I really want to do for Halloween is do like split down the middle. I don't think I'll be able to pull this off, but like Ken on one side, Oppenheimer on the other.
Yeah, seeing those two trailers back to back is very fun, very satisfying.
Yeah,
Barbie is the weirdest movie. Written by Noah Baumbach, directed by Greta Gerwig. I cannot understand.
It's apparently like
how this happened.
Like the trailer I saw for The Flash, right? It's like this is like fucking like the Truman Show, but with Barbies, right? Like Will Ferrell is the villain. Like,
yeah.
Oh man,
we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm excited to learn.
Oppenheimer, I am interested in. Like, I think Christopher Nolan's a good director. But there's definitely a part in my head that's like, you know, that sees like, you know, say the line, Oppenheimer, right? Like, also like, I don't think Einstein looks great in Oppenheimer. But you know, that's probably
it's the, you know what the funny thing about Oppenheimer is? Oppenheimer is going to be a little bit like Chernobyl. And I was thinking about this. I was like, it's weird that I'm talking about it in these terms. I don't want to spoil myself for Oppenheimer, because I know vaguely the story of the Manhattan Project, right? Like I think everybody does, right? A bunch of scientists go into the desert, make the atomic bomb, but I don't know the details, right? So what I'm interested in is seeing that story dramatized on screen for the first time. So yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing that like gets me is that like every time I see Matt Damon in those trailers, I just think of his character from Inglourious Bastards. And he's not the same character, but I so desperately want him to be that same character. Just because it's funny to me. But I like the memes around it, like it's, you know, because apparently like, you know, Barbie is like, you know, like the typical audience you think is like girly girls, but apparently like the female demographic really likes Cillian Murphy as like a, you know, he's like a, you know, a hot guy. And like, you know, there's a bunch of like weird people like me who are really hyped up on Barbie just because it looks like stupidly fun, right? Like, so, you know, just kind of like the inversion of expectations there. But I will probably see both of them at some point. I don't know if we need to do a cast on them or if just do a back half on them, but like, we'll see. We'll see.
We will see. What have you been doing this week? What else is on your mind, on your plate?
So I actually like went back and played some WoW actually, instead of just raid content. Like I did some of the I wanted to do the Crucible
story quests.
Well, I wanted the thing I probably wanted to do was the what's it called? The thing where you can transform gear into set pieces.
Oh, the catalyst.
Catalyst, yes. Thank you. Like I wanted to like hit that way. I started generating charges there or whatever. And I did a couple of the story beats. I did the thing where they go recover the silver scale. And I did the rebellion thing, which like the rebellion resolution.
So the interesting thing is I'm not caught up in. I know some stuff because people have talked about it, obviously, of what's happened with the end of the story. But the interesting thing is I am sort of behind on some of that, like the Black Dragonfly. I've done there's the intro stuff in Zerlek Cavern where you do the stuff in the Zakali war camp, and I actually, to be fair, really loved that. Which is funny because everybody hated that. They thought it was bad. I thought it was amazing. They can all eat my ass. It's good. That's a good story. But I haven't done any of the questing since then. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I'm still behind on the Black Dragon quest line too, but there was one that popped up that's like talk to one of the defectors from the rebellion and Alex Straza. And you basically go and you do you care about both
I guess not. This is different, yeah, than I expected. What rebellion specifically?
The Draconid
The
rebellion.
Primalists?
Hmm? There's like a group of like Draconids and other. What are the things that are like four pod dragons?
I don't know. Like Dragon Spawn, I think is what those are
Yeah,
called.
like there's like the rebel group that's like beneath Draca, beneath
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Beldraken.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's okay. I have done that quest. That's a side quest from the very beginning of the game.
No. There is a point that resolves it. That's a story. Like it has like the big pentagon, right? Like you go. I think you rescue or you convince somebody to turn early in the expansion. But there's this story signed quest that's like, essentially they're setting up a bomb beneath Veldraken and you have to go neutralize it. But it involves kind of like basically Alex Strauss being like, maybe we should listen to the rebels and see why they're mad, right? And you go through that. I'm surprised it's not getting more chatter on social media. Not that I've particularly looked, just because it's kind of like, their concerns are valid, but violence is bad, which is kind of like a thing. Like if you wanted to draw straight line parallels to like current politics, you could take it in any which way and be mad about it.
Oh, I mean, there was a huge uproar recently, funnily enough, about some of this like flash time shit. In the next patch, 10.1.5 is the mega dungeon Dawn of the Infinite, where you're like going back in time doing all this other sort of stuff. There's an interesting set of quests surrounding this where you and Chromie go and do important things in the timeline, and one of the important things is you assure Alex Straza's captivity and rape, because you make sure the Dragon Maw orcs, who were part of the original horde in the second, have the dragon soul and can use it to continue dominating Alex Straza and forcing her to give birth to red dragons for them to ride, which, to be fair, is a horrendous retcon. Okay, because in Warcraft 2, there are dragon rider orcs who are riding red dragons, and then we later learn that red dragons are good dragons, actually. Well, how are the red dragons bad in Warcraft 2? Well, let me tell you. And they fully walked onto the rake with that one, and it got announced that those quests are getting scrapped from the PTR. they're just getting rid of them. Oh god.
Yeah. Luce is in the chat. I heard about the assassination, but not that one. What is the assassination?
So, to be fair, the Steelman cape for the Steelman for this one is that this plot point is it is not so direct, right? It is, you are giving the dragon soul back to the Dragon Maw orcs, right? Here is a MacGuffin. The MacGuffin has been stolen. You need to make sure the MacGuffin goes and stays in the right hands in order to preserve the timeline. It just so happens that the knock-on effects of all that includes all this stuff with Alex Straza, right? And so it's not as though Chromie is like, well, let's go make sure Alex Straza keeps being forcibly bred and, whatever, you know what I mean? Like mind controlled. That's not happening, right? But it is the logical conclusion of what you're doing.
Who is Agent Kiernan?
This is interesting. Did you ever do the Legion questing from the Rogue class hall?
No.
A character named Agent Amber Kiernan, I don't know, starts that quest in a sort of film noir sense by showing up at this location with a cryptic note, and then she falls over dead. She's been assassinated. And you eventually learn that this is a whole plot where, dreadlords are infiltrating SI7. They've replaced Matthias Shaw and are trying to use that in order to get Anduin to start the Fourth War. There's actually a lot of really interesting implications behind all of this stuff. And one of the things that you do is you go back and you ensure that Amber Kiernan gets assassinated, because if she doesn't, you never unearth this plot and all this bad stuff.
Okay, yeah, that seems like, seems like not a thing that you should do, right? Like you can play it, like you could, if like it worked when in the what is it, Teen Titans Go to the Movies, when they like shoot Batman's parents because it's so
Yeah, and I would say it works in the Flash because of all of the sort of thematic context. I don't love it here. I also just I am growing to have complicated feelings towards this stuff in general, just because um it is weird that the bronze dragonflight is so absurdly powerful. It feels like compared to the other dragonflights. Like, oh, I'm Sibelian. I can move rocks. I'm Nose Dormu, and I can go into the time ways and rewrite history. You know what I mean? That's a lot of pressure to put on like a fucking dragon who's just like, do you know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's also probably a thing that like they didn't think about too hard when they did it, and they're stuck with the consequences, right? Like,
Absolutely, yeah. I especially as the cosmos has kind of expanded, we have this thing of these warring forces. You have order, chaos, um, whatever, like life, death, that stuff. The nature of time in that is a unresolved phenomenon, I guess. And so it's weird that it's the purview of this specific set of dragons that were given their powers by this one Titan watcher who's not even a Titan himself. It's just like all that stuff. I don't know.
yeah,
If you actually think about it too hard, you will just like kind of make it make sense.
what it feels like is that they did like, oh, what are the normal dragon colors? Red, blue, black, green, and then we got this cool bronze one, and they're gonna have a cool different thing, right? Because like, I can kind of get like magic, nature, life being big enough domains that it works. I don't think the Earth thing really works at like at that level. Maybe like that it's like the actual Terra. I get it, but like time is all obviously stands above. Luce is in the chat. By the way, Chromie got the worst evil name.
I will actually go to bat for Chromie's evil name. I think it's the greatest. You know what Chromie's evil name is?
What is it?
Morchi.
I thought everybody thought that the Infinite Dragonflight thing that you did in the intro quest was going to be evil Chromie. Is it not?
That's what I said. I guess I was wrong, but yeah, Morchi is the Infinite Dragonflight version of Chromie, which is obviously kind of Chromie backwards, sort of.
It's
right?
just an anagram, right? Like it's yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think the root of all of this is bad. From Richard Knack. Do you know about like the War of the Ancients trilogy?
No.
So when Warcraft 3 came out, they wanted there's a lot of stuff that harkens back to the War of the Ancients, right? The first time that the Legion invaded Azeroth. It's a big piece of sort of the Night Elf story. It's why Illidan is imprisoned, for instance. Malfurion is asleep. They wrote a book, a series of books alongside it, written by a guy named Richard Knack. And the dragons were also his creation. Like the Dragonflight stuff was kind of like also his creation from a book of Dragons, which is sort of these mechanics or whatever. I just think it all of this lore harkens back to him and that time in WoW lore where like lore itself was kind of not as protected a thing, archivally or historiographically, whatever. And so, yeah, I feel like that's where we ended up.
Yeah, you can't unring that bell, and so
cannot unring that bell.
Right. God, like I didn't know that any of that stuff about the Red Dragons, right? Like that literally feels like orcs are the evil guys in the first game. Therefore, they ride the dragons, which are traditionally evil. Therefore, that's the thing. And then you have to retcon all this stuff to like make it make sense, which is not great.
Yeah. And the reason it's stepping on rakes is you can just not acknowledge any of that. You can
just like was the fact that Alex Straza being imprisoned, is this like a thing that is known, or is this lore that was invented for this time, this quest?
No, that stuff is known.
Okay.
Yeah, that stuff is like, yeah, well known. It's also more like part of it is like I sort of loathe a lot of the way that the WoW community talk about sort of sexual assault. It's one of those things where it's like Sylvanas is a rape allegory because Arthas killed her, but also like stole her soul or whatever. And it's just like that stuff to me, it doesn't track. That's incorrect, right? This bad media literacy. You are putting a square peg in a round stuff. But the Alex Strauss stuff is pretty direct. Like, there's not a good way to talk around that. Like,
how do dragons reproduce in the first place? Like,
they fucking lay a bunch of eggs.
Like, is that it? Because, like, most believe. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how birds work. So I'm gonna keep close my mouth before I get myself in trouble. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. Have you played any more Diablo 4?
A little bit. Yeah. I've been doing some stuff. I'm like level 52 or so now. Just been rolling through some stuff, but it's not like super big concern to me. I've been waiting to like play with people, just like hasn't lined up. Luce says let's have a whole podcast about dragon fucking Be Brave Mango. I don't think I will. Because you could go like this is like a whole like a universe comparator. Like I'm sure there's some universe where dragons do live births. And like, then you get into like what even are dragons, right? Like I know someone who could guess. You know what? I don't. Oh God.
Oh my God.
I do not care about the intricacies of World of Warcraft dragon intercourse. Really, are there Asian style dragons in WoW?
Yeah, but they're not true dragons. Cloud serpents.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
But cloud serpents are an offshoot of wind serpent. So like the like in Thousand Needles or whatever, flying vipers, basically. They're flying snakes. Yeah. Cloud serpents are a like kind of the Pandaria version of that.
Okay, but they're not dragons.
I think they are. I think they might be dragons. In a proto dragon sense, right? They are not true dragon. In the sense of they're not members of the dragon.
Right. Well, yeah, because all the are true dragons then like awakened by Tyr by definition.
Yeah. Okay. Like most proto dragons are just fucking animals. Proto drakes are animals. And the cloud serpents are like they're basically just animals, but then you also have Yu'lon, for instance, kind of sapient. So
yeah, that makes sense. But like they're like also like the other animal gods are also sapient, but they're also it's like not like anybody's mad that like whatever the ox's name is sapient, even though like most oxes are not, right? Like but whatever. Yeah. But mostly like I've been putting the most of my time into Street Fighter 6, I think.
Okay.
Just because running sets, I'm climbing my way I'm almost out of bronze at this point, which is kind of surprising. Nice. I think what happened is when I started playing early and like people were still getting like the brackets were kind of establishing themselves, and so now I'm just kind of like I'm not like so good that I'm like shooting like that I'm dominating, but I am getting. So the way the ranking up works is if you get streaks, you start ranking up faster. I'm getting pretty good streaks, so and you can fall out of like each tier has you can be like bronze 1, bronze 2, bronze 3, and you can fall out of your bronze like your number, but you can't fall out of your tier. So like I couldn't fall out of bronze if I tried, but I could like fall out of I think I'm bronze 4 now. I could fall down to bronze 3. But I am still on average winning. So, and also I'm just like kind of getting my sea legs back, right? Like remembering how to like play, remembering kind of like the mind games and how to like do reads and whatnot. So practicing my combos, dropping most of them. It's great. But yeah, what about you? What have you been?
Mostly Diablo. We're pushing 20s in WoW. I got 8, kind of crazy. And it was honestly a very hero moment getting AOTC. We were we were kind of in third phase of Sarkareth, and you know how you can go down into the void realm or whatever.
Maybe. Which
Have
one's
you ever
Sarkareth?
taken a bomb
Oh
in
yes, yeah, yeah,
Sarkareth?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So it's like that, right? There were just like a bunch of mechanics happening, and I was like, I feel like the only way we win this is if I just lust myself, basically. So I went into the void phase. I picked up 10 of the stacks, and I came up out of the void phase, and I just sat on the boss doing my execute rotation at like 5% HP as like the whole raid was wiping around us and we killed the boss, which was very satisfying, right? In that kind of like you know, hero, I saved, I saved the pull kind of thing. But yeah, we've been pushing 20s, which feels good, right? It's weird to think that we're only 6 weeks into this patch, that the catalyst just opened, because that is a short amount of time. It's about 25% of what we're used to when it comes to sort of the full length of a patch. Maybe it'll be shorter for Dragonflight. Dragonflight patches do seem to kind of be faster, like delivering content more regularly and everything else. But yeah, we're kind of pushing 21 last week. And we have all 20s in our vault, that kind of thing, for starting up for next week. But the big thing that I've been doing is playing a lot of Diablo, which is mostly because it's just such a great thing to kind of like zone out to. I'm actually in this weird spot where I have done the capstone dungeon to get to tier 4 twice, and both times I sort of inadvertently had a time limit. Because one of them, the Helltide spawned, and I was like, well, I want to do the Helltide, so I abandoned the dungeon. I went and did the Helltide. And in the second one, it was right before raid. And I was like, boy, I bet if I sat down and did the reps, I'm pretty sure I could get this. But like, because that is like a sweaty thing compared to sort of like a chill thing, mostly what I've been doing is just like running around clearing side dungeons to get renown. And sort of like get that up to max or whatever. So yeah, sort of where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I've been doing side quests. Like I've been doing like I haven't done a Helltide yet, just because like every time I like see one, it's like 2 minutes left, and so it's like okay. Um, but I've been doing whispering trees and whatnot. But like I said, I will probably get more into it when I can get like nailed down like Monic or you to actually play with.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, maybe after this, I will just like go and do this thing, get into tier 4 finally.
Yeah.
I think I'm level 66 now, right? So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
My build is actually pretty nuts. I like a lot about we talked about this, but one of the things that has sort of happened, and I saw a really interesting Twitter thread from an old WoW designer who now works at it, about it, where my build is it's about making the best with what you have, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff is interesting. I think that stuff is cool and interesting.
For a hot second, I had a really fun build, which was Stomp creates an earthquake, or no, Leap creates an earthquake, Stomp creates an earthquake, Stomp resets Leap. And so just like, Stomp or Leap, Stomp, Leap, and like, like things all over the place. And was combining that with the weapon swapping build. It was just like, it was stupid, but it was still fun. But then I like quickly outleveled that stuff, so it didn't stick around for long.
I'm sort of weirdly in some of that build. I don't have the leap portion, but there's a legendary I have, which is when you activate all 3 bonuses on your walking arsenal, you stop automatically.
Oh, very cool.
And that triggers the earthquake, right? So I have Stomp, I have the earthquake, and I do this sort of, right now my build is mostly Hammer of the and Frenzy. I also have a Frenzy thing, right, that increases my Frenzy stacks by a bunch. So what I'm mostly doing is just like wailing on things with Frenzy and then Hammer, right? But then I have Rend in the build so that when I want to trigger all 3, I can just Rend, and it's sort of like having a second charge of Stomp, right? When I want to activate my Stomp kind of to set stuff up, which is sweet. This is a fun build. Actually, the thing I was doing right before this was I was actually equipping a bunch of random dumb stuff just because I wanted to do my weapon expertise. Getting all my weapon expertise is to 10 because you have to like level that up by using the weapon. So I equipped a random pole arm, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. Now I have everything at 10. Good. So we're gonna go hard. See how it works.
I'm still spinning. Whee! But yeah.
Yeah, the one build I have not done is the whirlwind build. Which I hear is the meta, right? Like if you're a barbarian, whirlwind build is kind of like the only way to go, but I have refused the meta thus far. I feel like my build is really powerful. Going for it.
I've heard at least for PvP that like Thorns is the barbarian build.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Which is interesting. So, you know, we'll see.
That is cool. I do have thorns, so I do have a lot of thorns in my build, but that's mostly because I don't have any good way to deal with ranged. So I just have a lot of thorns, and I let them kill them. I let them break themselves upon my body.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I've gotten some I got like a piece of rare gear with like +2 potions. I'm like, oh, that's fucking sweet, right? Like, you know, now I can just like spam drink potions harder. But yeah. Yeah. Well, that's basically been it. We're a bit over time. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, if you'd like to email us with any of the things that we talked about on this podcast, or about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at derpsgames.com or derpsgames@gmail.com, or podcast@derpsgames.com or derpsgames@gmail.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/derpsgames. These go out live, as well as youtube.com/derpsgames. Rate and review us wherever you find podcasts, all that stuff. There's links in the description. Buddy, that's everything I have. Do you have anything you're looking to promote? The Australia demo, maybe?
The Stray demo. So the other thing is we just announced a new title, by the way, called Ever After Falls. Ever After Falls is a Kickstarted title. It's sort of like Stardew Valley. You know, it's like the base of Stardew Valley, but with some other stuff on top of that, right? So kind of imagine Stardew Valley, but with like, you know, there's these drones that'll help you out, kind of like in Factorio in a way. And there's this whole ARPG Diablo like sort of combat system. That demo is also up. The Australia demo is up. That demo is up. I did the Astra stream, so the 4th character for Australia is now live. Astra, or not live, but we have shown her Astra. The Astra stream was really fun. I had an insanely powerful build and then another insanely powerful build, which was really fun to kind of show off and get into. Astra is a weirdly frustrating character because she's all about
what? Sorry, you cut out for a second there.
Randomness and probability. Okay. So her her core mechanics are she has this thing called chaos dice in her pool. Chaos dice are just when you roll them, they turn into any die that could possibly be, but with a 25% chance of being an epic die, which is really good, getting an epic die. But like you can increase that probability. She also has dodge and crit, so like her stuff will crit randomly. She will dodge corruption randomly. She has a thing called about confuse, right? Confuse is when you get a value, so let's say it's a confuse 3. When you use that, you have a 50-50 of making it purification or corruption, right? And so for a game about drawing random dice and rolling them, she's layering on additional sort of RNG effects on top of that, which has made her frustrating internally. There are a lot of people who really hate Astra, but I really love Astra because manipulating probabilities like that, I think, is what makes RNG fun. And her whole thing is about manipulating correct probability to get really powerful outcomes. Which I think is sweet. So
very cool. Very, very cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal